Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in for another TAC webinar. So excited for today's conversation. My guest today is a longtime friend. I got to know Doug. Man, how long has it been, Doug?
Holy cow. I think 2015, like 10 years, basically, I think.
You
You were,
haven't
you
you
were,
haven't changed at all. You look exactly the same.
so you.
Oh, no,
I
no,
got a
no.
little bit, my hair is a little bit grayer. I got the gray right here, but you were at HubSpot in 2015, right?
Oh yeah, I joined HubSpot in 2010.
Okay. So yeah, I think it was 2015. It was at a partner day. And I remember we were talking about, you were talking about cars and bubblegum, cars, bubblegum, and Sales Hub.
That sounds about right. Yeah, like how everything, even when you buy a pack of gum, can be distilled down into these three stages of a
Yep.
buying experience.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So, folks, today it's going to be an action-packed conversation. We have multiple visuals we're going to flash up on the screen. This is not going to be your standard webinar where we just talk and present slides. We want to make this very engaging. We want to have you ask questions throughout it. We want to, make Doug feel uncomfortable. No, I'm just kidding.
Tell you what, in 2024 isn't uncomfortable like the standard state of being for for most places.
Fair enough. Let's flash up the first slide though. So Doug, and I go way back, so we're gonna have some fun with this. But let me pull up the deck, and he can do a quick intro. I'll do a quick intro, and then again, like I said, we're gonna get right into the presentation pretty quickly. In the content. So you all should be able to see the slide. You're at this webinar about how to craft an integrated go-to-market strategy. Doug, do that quick intro for everyone.
Yeah, so I'm Doug Davidoff. Founded Lift Enablement in oh my gosh, I like completely lost track of when I founded it in 2004. So we've been doing this for a while. We've really changed our focus probably three key times. So we're like in version 3. Um, what what we do is we've always taken a structural approach, really try to figure out what are the things that successful companies are doing that, Mark, if you notice successful growth companies, when you look at what they're doing, it looks like it takes less effort than the companies that aren't getting that I call the juice for the squeeze factor. And then my most recent claim to fame is I translated, basically the last 20 years of experimentation and work into, there you go. Yes. Rock on, the revenue acceleration framework, the best-selling, award-winning, I might add.
That guy right there. Whoop, right there.
There we go. Rock on.
Yep.
See, I got some back there too. We got a giveaway coming up. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, so Doug and I go way back. HubSpot is where we met. Do a quick intro of myself. I've been in what, B2B tech for a long time, Doug. A long time. Probably, I don't know. We've seen a lot. And I love ping pong, by the way. We have an event coming up at Inbound in a few weeks. So if you're coming to Inbound, drop a giddy up in the chat. We'll invite you to this event at Spin, a ping pong experience, if you will. We're doing it with Terminus. But what I do now, after doing some stints at HubSpot, Drift, AirMeet, we provide on-demand go-to-market services. And the number one thing, Doug, people ask us about is what's on this next slide. And this is the number one thing we help people solve is how do we integrate what we're doing across marketing, sales, our product strategy, customer success elements into a united, unified approach to matching our marketing and sales, etc., to how people actually buy today. Because it has changed and it continues to change. So folks, on this slide, this is what we're talking about today, right, Doug? Did I miss anything?
No, you did not. You did not. This is what we're talking about. And it's interesting because I think the biggest challenge when we talk about how the way people buy has changed is the change has been in type as opposed to in degree. So like the words are the same, the elements are all still there, but the fundamental place, the where and the how, this is why we're going to start off with defining your game.
Yep.
Is, I think it was like, I started seeing this 2011, 2012. I started talking about this regularly, and it was good is no longer good enough. And, having been born into a family of small business owners, entrepreneurs. My parents ran a travel agency for my until I was a full adult. As a matter of fact, the first company that I started was with my parents and brother advising travel agencies. um, it was like so much of small business and even large, billion-dollar plus companies. They serve that middle ground. You always had that choice to be great. Jim Collins has done all this stuff on good to great, but it used to be, what good was where there was this big center of good, and you could win customers, make good margins. But like that middle ground between technology, sophistication, I think one of the big elements of the Great Recession, going way back to the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, is I have a friend who's a big poker player. He likes to say it wiped out the fish, right? So now everybody that's there has that basic capability. So you really have to draw a clear distinction. We were talking about this before the webinar started. You have to really define, like, why are you here? Why should people pay attention to you? And if you're not playing your game, and it is so easy to fall into playing someone else's game. When you're not playing your game, that's when all the craziness and mishigas and friction, or really what I like to call sludge, really hits hard.
Well, I love this next visual that you created for everyone, which is, again, the first thing we're going to cover, defining your game. This is a great visual and a great set of questions to bring into annual planning discussions. I mean, maybe even before then, Doug, but like, annual planning's happening now. It's going to happen between now and the end of the year. Like, walk us through these, quickly, because we have a lot to cover, but like, this is one of the ways you got to frame the game.
Yeah. And by the way, at the risk of sounding like a commercial for a moment, I really dig into some of these questions in a full way in the book, right? So, when I talk about go-to-market strategy, one of the things that I talk about is, what is your sales model and what is your economic model? Those are core parts of your business model, right? How do you make money? What type of money are you making? And, PLG is obviously a really common, popular approach. That's one model. If you're a PLG model, then you shouldn't be playing large capital sales game. But if you're a large capital sales company, right, you shouldn't be playing the PLG game, because the models conflict. So really understand, how does your company generate customers and money, and how can you exploit it? The most important question, if you forget everything else we talked about today, I mean, Mark, I'm sure you're going to say something worth remembering even more than this. But for me, if you forget everything I said, the most important question you can answer is, who do you want to be a hero to? Right? Who do you want to be absolutely indispensable for? Who do you wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night thinking about their problems? That's where you become great. That's where you draw that distinction. We spent so much time segmenting our products and segmenting solutions that we miss that the real power is segmenting the customer, the who, right? And more importantly, segmenting the problems. What's the problems that you solve better than anybody else?
That's the start of any good integrated campaign, by the way, folks. What Doug just said, it's both from a go-to-market overall strategy and business strategy approach, but then when you build a campaign, which we're going to get very specific into today, you start with the who and the why.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the thing that's interesting, and I don't mean to give away our secrets here, like the real secret sauce, but I find the challenge that companies have, that people have with both sales and marketing, on one hand, to me, is really confounding, because if you think about it, what's the basis of sales and marketing? Someone has a value proposition, right? Which is a promise that solves a problem that's important to somebody. And a problem that somebody has that's important, it causes pain, right? Now think about this. If you have a problem that is important to you and it is causing you pain, what do you want to do? You would like to get rid of the pain.
Fix
right?
it.
So if I come in, this whole idea that I have to convince you to do something,
Yep.
that's where we get ourselves into trouble, right? What I need to do is get the static out of the way so that people can understand, oh yeah, this could help me. And then I find sales take care of themselves.
Yeah. No, agreed. No, I like that approach. I like that. So define your game, number one. And we're going to have a framework that helps you do this at the campaign level in a moment. Second step, build your team. And every marketing team, Doug, as you know, and every sales team, every company looks different. There isn't one org chart, right? It's not, every single one looks a little bit different. They rhyme, but they're different. So instead of showing you like, oh, here's like the typical teams, we all know what the typical teams are. What I did instead is I actually went to Forrester, and I do like some of the stuff that Forrester produces, by the way.
Mhm.
So shout out to them. They have this layer of go-to-market architecture that I find to be very interesting as it relates to even what you just said in terms of defining the game. So you can see on the left here, they have market strategy, buyer strategy, engagement strategy. So from a team standpoint, as you think about campaign execution and campaign planning, well, you first have to understand where do we play? What's the market? What's the game? Right? Right. Those are the segments. Those are those things you were just talking about. Then you have to understand the buyer, right? And that's then starting to get into the campaign level, right? Now, what campaign are we building for what buyer, and who in the company needs to be part of that campaign? Is it all of marketing? Is it some of sales? Is it like the AMs and more like people who own the relationship with the account because it's more of a customer centric campaign versus new business campaign? You know, what are the customer problems now or pains that are different than when they signed up with us, right? And then the third layer, engagement. Who's going to engage with them? Is it just marketing? Is it sales? Is it executives that need to engage? How do we engage with them? And that's where you get into customer journeys. That's when you start to talk about tactics, channels, offers, those things. But a lot of people think, oh, a campaign, it's just channels and offers. And they miss these other layers and how to think about the team from the internal who should be participating in helping you build the campaign, execute the campaign, and measure the campaign. That is so important. And again, that's why we called it as the second step, because how you do this will then ultimately start to get into this next slide. I'll briefly show it, but then we'll pause, which is then like the customer experience, right? Like the customer experience, the front office, the back office. So we'll pause here, but Doug, anything you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, we're going to dig into this in more specifically in a few slides or in a few bullet points. But I think this gets into the difference between managing the complex and the complicated.
Yeah.
But I think one of the places that people miss, I see this happen all the time, especially and when you said let's do integrated go-to-market strategy, I was like, I'm there. Is I see marketing, they're doing this great job. Sales is doing a great job. What's happening is they're operating in separate ecosystems, for lack of a better word. And what like so marketing might be implementing something and sales doesn't need to play a role, but sales is impacted by that, or customer success is impacted by that. You know, one of my favorite business quotes of all time comes from Peter Drucker. He said, it's rare that businesses go out of business because of starvation.
Yeah.
They're far more likely to go out of business because of indigestion. Right. And
not enough focus. Not enough focus.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. Correct. You know, one of the points I make in the book is we've talked about it wrong because we keep talking about do more with less. And the reality is the success formula is do less with more. Right. And if we focus on those things and we think about and we consider who are the users of it, who's doing it, but we also need to think about who's impacted by it, how are they impacted by it, and then who impacts this, right? So again, thinking through that whole journey and that process is what really leads to greater velocity, bigger impact, more juice for the squeeze.
So do we want to move to the visual on the customer journey map alignment now, getting into the third thing you need, or do you want to pause and take a step back?
Like pop up the customer experience slide again, because okay. I want to. It's a metaphor that I love.
Here we
right?
Go.
And I think the theater is a great metaphor for what we do. Right? What do we want? We want a great customer experience. Well, what's a great customer experience? It's a standing ovation. I'm seeing Bruce Springsteen for the 49th time on September 7th, Mark.
Wow.
Down. I'm excited to it. I love The Boss, right? Amazing experience. How about that? How would you like to have somebody who's going out of their way to see you for the 49th time? And I'm not even like a major, I'm not even in the top, 10% of Springsteen followers.
What?
That's the, oh yeah, I know people who've seen them like 500 times. That's an amazing customer experience. That's what triggers word of mouth. That's what drives that proverbial flywheel. Well, what creates that customer experience? It's the front stage. What are all the things that a customer sees, feels, touches, or smells? Anytime they touch us, that is a front stage experience.
Yep.
We'll talk to any performer that does an amazing job. Read Bruce Springsteen's autobiography and listen to how he talks about his backstage, the people who put him in a position to be successful, the guy who tunes his guitar. I mean, we've all seen this with other bands. Part of the show is Bruce changes guitars, and he's like, almost 80 years old as he throws his guitar across the stage, and his guitar roadie throws the new guitar to him. They're catching it, they're plugging it in. Like that backstage is what enables the front stage to perform so well. That's why RevOps is so important. RevOps is a backstage discipline. And then all the other elements of the business, it's by having that and looking at it holistically, that's how we drive that superior performance. And that's how we're able to deliver on this next slide that is not going to be new to anybody. Right? We've all seen this. It all makes sense. And this is just an example of a customer journey alignment map that we've done. It basically breaks down each part of the process. Who are the teams involved? Who's primary? Who's secondary? What's happening? Like, what's the operational element? Where does marketing become sales? What are, like, all of this? Candidly, it's not hard to put this together. What's hard is actually making it real, right?
To integrate it together. Integrate it together. That's because, like, right now, like, look, these are literal silos, like columns.
Correct. Right. And Mark, I think silos get a bad name. Right. I think we need silos. Right. I think specialization brings efficiency. We're going to talk about efficiency. Right. Specialization brings efficiency. Specialization brings focus. Right. If we don't have silos, if we don't have constraints, then I don't have any focus. Right. So there's nothing wrong with silos. But think about it. Where does the term silo come from? It's a farming term, right? It's how we store things. But that silo is integrated into a broader process so that it's basically there to allow you to address constraints and bottlenecks. It's the realization that while this silo might be in and of itself, there's also an interdependence. And so defining that experience from accounting, and I'm not saying everybody on this call needs to go like, what is the role that accounting plays in? But from your support processes all the way through to your, to your sales process, to your big annual campaign, to your show, that solving for the whole is always going to work better than solving for any individual component. And I think that's the piece that people miss, and that's why this is so hard.
Agreed. And before we move on to the fourth thing, which is messaging and positioning, number 3 was around the customer journey. We talked about it holistically from its like macro view. But when you think about a campaign standpoint, Doug, what is the ideal? It's usually more than one journey, but what's the journey? Someone going back to the who are you going after with this campaign? Who are you targeting? Who are you trying to engage? What's that front stage experience, and what needs to happen front stage? What needs to happen backstage for this campaign to be successful? Right. So that's the key thing, folks. Like, so if you don't think RevOps needs to be involved in all of your campaigns, you're probably wrong. Like, RevOps should be involved in every campaign. I remember when I was at Drift, we would build integrated campaigns, and we'd always have someone on the RevOps team supporting us in executing, setting up the campaign, executing the campaign, measuring the campaign, learning from it.
Yep. When you were at HubSpot, one of the things that Brian Halligan talked about was the famous beer game popularized at Sloan School, right? Which is really a really simple systems logistics game of this beer becomes popular, people start ordering it, and just the craziness of what happens.
Yep.
And the reason it's such a famous simulation is because it demonstrates how systems work, right? And while automation is great and the technology enables us to measure, the difficulty is we have this tendency to measure recency far more than what matters. Like
Yes.
you and I talked about it one time, and I think this is
Yep.
the biggest issue with modern lead gen is a new lead shows up 10 times more easily than someone who's been in your orbit for a year, 3 years, 5 years. And it's like, well, wait a second. Actually, that one who's been in our orbit for 3 to 5 years, who's familiar with us already, that's actually more valuable. We got to account for the lag, and that's why RevOps needs to be involved, right? RevOps
Yes.
is like what RevOps is what's bringing that holistic element, allowing that specialization and allowing that focus.
Agreed. All right, so let's move on to, and I think systems are a good thing, by the way. Like systems help with creativity when designed correctly, and they help get to outcomes faster. So let's go now into campaign planning and then execution. So one of the most important things, Doug, when it comes to a good campaign is the story. Like, what are you saying? Why are you saying it? How do you say something? So this next visual, this next graphic, and by the way, everyone is going to get the slides emailed to them after, probably tomorrow. But if you want to take screenshots, be my guest. This is one of my next favorite visuals that we work with a lot of our customers on, which is product marketing. Is an aspect of this, but this is bigger than product marketing. This is bigger than brand marketing. This is going back to that idea of how do you activate a holistic customer journey? And then how does each one of your campaigns fit into it across the right touch points? So this example comes from my time at AirMeet. We built a brand level messaging platform around join together. Like AirMeet's brand promise is we're going to help people join together online through webinars and events. Join together. Solution positioning, sometimes known as category or solution. We created this new kind of category called event-led growth. So we're trying to evangelize it, right? So like, well, how do people join together, and how does that actually help a business or ICP or businesses? Other things obviously made the ICP up, but like, how do you use events to grow your bottom line, become more profitable, more efficient, and grow? Then it's like, hey, how do we tie in our product, which we named the Event Experience Cloud, into this story? And then from there, when you think about features, and a lot of people think features and products, and they don't think of them sometimes necessarily correctly, but like when you think about the features in the product, hey, how do you use event signals as a way to grow, to also then help you get the right people together to ultimately help them achieve their goals? And then at the very bottom, when you land the plane, you need a place to land the plane. What is the ultimate value that a customer can expect to see when they use AirMeet, right? Because like at the end of the day, if you're not talking about value and you don't have a value-based messaging framework as part of most of your campaigns, and not every campaign needs to have this, but most of them do, like you're missing a critical element of like tying back the problem, the pain, the promise to the outcome, to the result. So I'll pause there. Not every campaign, by the way, has to go through all levels of altitude. No. You could have just a brand level campaign that then triggers into a solution level campaign, that triggers into a product level campaign. And you could do for different audiences at different, right? It's a whole like three-dimensional matrix, Doug. But I think the story of your campaign, that's the point of the slide. You need a story. You need to say something worth saying.
Yeah, I think what's brilliant here, by the way, Mark, I've always loved your ability to name things. The beauty of this is you need to do this organization, right? This is what enables those silos to work as one, because even if I'm doing just a brand positioning campaign or I'm doing a feature positioning campaign, like whatever you're doing, understanding where it fits in the picture. This is the fundamental problem with outsourcing, right? Someone hires some lead generation group or we jump on the SDR bandwagon or the AI SDR bandwagon, and all of a sudden these messages start flying out that aren't taking this into account, that aren't restricted. Having just written the book, I learned the hardest thing. Like I knew this, but I experienced it. What you put in the book isn't what makes the book great. It's what you take out.
Ooh,
right.
That's a quote.
And what the great authors will tell you, and I'm not saying that I'm one of the great authors yet, but the great authors will tell you is it was only when they sacrificed like their favorite part of the story, their favorite part, that enabled the story to take hold. Like that's what creates that velocity, that synergy. And we were talking about it before the webinar. I'm not going to mention the company, but this is a company that built itself on an amazing brand position, an amazing story, right? Whether you were ever going to buy from them or not, you told their story.
Yep.
Right. And all of a sudden, I don't know what their story is.
Vaporized.
Yeah. And
not good.
I'll give you an example of the story that went bad, and you're now seeing it again. And then I just have to share like the greatest, like you'll know you have your value positioning nailed down if you ever get it to this level. So look at Starbucks, right? Starbucks, the first time Schultz retired, like all of a sudden this, like that brand positioning stopped being the driver. It started being like the why started to disappear. And in the first 2 or 3 years, everything looked good. Revenue numbers up, margins up, costs down.
Yeah.
But then suddenly it wasn't what it was. They got back to performance, but they've never locked it back in. And now you see they just, spent how many millions of dollars to hire a new CEO. And, that's an example. Like, what is Starbucks? It's lost its story.
Oh, I'll give you one more good example because we're halfway through the conversation. We've covered 4 out of the 8 topics. I'll give you one more example. I'm going to actually throw this. I'm going to find it really quickly because I'm talking about this actually in a podcast recording I'm doing right after this. Nike, I think, is an even better example. And here's the link, everyone. And hopefully this doesn't distract you from our webinar and the conversation, but take a look at how much enterprise value and brand destruction Nike has done over the last 5 years. It is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. So anyway, we've covered. Go ahead.
I have to say this because you know what? Like the sad part of seeing that, I haven't clicked on it, but I know what you're referring to, is they followed the instruction book.
Well, they listened to SaaS marketers.
Right. They started to measure everything.
It's a bad idea.
And suddenly the brand disappeared. By the way, I got to give you the value positioning. You have it nailed. If you can get it to this, I'm curious if you agree this is the greatest value positioning of all time.
Yes.
When it absolutely, positively has to be there overnight.
Yeah. I mean, UPS or FedEx. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that was FedEx when everyone thought their competition was a letter and they were charging $100 to send a 1-page document.
No. Yeah, exactly. No. So folks, I just put in the chat too, what we've covered so far. And again, you will get the slides the next day. If you're listening to the recording, you should have the slides. If you don't, like, let Doug or I know. We've defined the game. We've built the team at high level. You map the customer journey and you're going to write the messaging and positioning for the campaign, right? And again, like think of a campaign as a micro element of the macro thing. What is the macro thing? It's the company, the brand, the product, like what you sell, right? And each of these campaigns is like is supporting that, right? It's supporting that in a different way. And one of the next things you'll see is an actual example of an integrated revenue campaign, how to structure it. I'm so excited to show this. Before we do that though, let's go backstage, Doug, and let's talk a bit more about RevOps and the RevOps component to all this. So I'm going to pull up my screen again, and we should all see this now. The 7 keys to successful RevOps, helping you execute integrated campaigns.
And Mark, since we don't have 5 hours, I'm going to avoid my impulse to try to talk about each point individually. I'm going to hit this on a couple ones. The first one, and what I want to get across, like this is the key to the difference between what I like to call strategic RevOps and at best tactical RevOps. That is, we get lost by trying to manage the complicated when what we're really doing is managing the complex. What's the difference? Complex means there is no one thing. Like a machine, I was talking to a client of mine the other day, and again, we were talking about the beauties of 2024, and he started off working as a service tech, right? And He said, the days of, yeah, I think he said if it wasn't for my knees, back, and hip, I might think about going back to that again. And I said, the beautiful thing about a machine is when a machine breaks, you can fix it. There's a reason that it broke. The challenge when we talk about marketing or sales is they're a system of systems, right? So when we pull one thing out, like we take email marketing, we pull it out, we go, oh, we're going to fix our email marketing. Well, when you change your email marketing, you're changing everything else, whether you realize it or not. And to really blow your mind from a space-time continuum, when you change one thing, you're changing its predecessor cause in a complex system. So it's not just what happens after that. So really, it is why change less. I learned this when I was a financial advisor. The best investors make fewer trades. By the way, the best poker players fold more often. They play very specific hands. So understand, manage the complexity. Again, you're managing for the holistic, for the total.
Okay.
The second key thing that I'll talk about is, and it connects so well to the frameworks that you're sharing and what we just talked about. Identify your crucial waypoints.
Yes.
Right? We're sailing from Annapolis. Yep, Mark, I'm not going to Maine. I'm an Annapolis guy. We're sailing from Annapolis to Barcelona. No one charts their course as a direct route from Annapolis to Barcelona, right?
No.
Because what do they have to do along the way, Mark? They have to tack.
You got to tack.
See what I did there?
Oh, that's clever.
Right. You identify your waypoints and you go from waypoint to waypoint. And by the way, if you've got stormy seas and things are really disruptive and complicated, you shorten your waypoints.
Yes.
When the skies are clear, you can lengthen those waypoints. Right here, here's an interesting statistic. I don't know that this is 100% accurate, but it's close enough. Did you know that a plane, when you fly from point A to point B, a plane is off course more than 95% of the time?
I did know that. I used to fly. I used to be a pilot. So yeah.
Right. Right. That's what it's about. And then the last thing on that is I love the idea of building a cross-functional friction review team.
Yes.
Because by the way, the problem's not friction, it's sludge. Sludge is the behavioral term for negative friction. Because remember, everything of value is friction, right? If we didn't have friction, our cars would spin off the road the moment there was a drop of rain. One person's friction is another person's value. One person's friction is another person's critical element to ensure we don't make a mistake that leads to a bad customer engagement or whatever the case may be. Really understanding how those things work together, and you start thinking about your revenue generation process as a manufacturing process, not just a single step. Those are the keys to building your backstage.
You're gonna beat me in the quotes of the day. That was philosophical right there, Professor Davidoff. No, I love it. So we're like guys, folks, we're like right on time. The next stuff we talk about, a lot of it, I'm just gonna flash this up because we got a couple more visuals, Doug, right? You can find inside of our community TAC Insider. So you can see this on the screen now. Like the next thing I'm going to show right after this visual is one of the favorite things that people I see. Actually, Emily, or I think she just left. Emily's an Insider member. The people who join TAC Insider love these templates. We have like 250 templates and tools inside this community, Doug. This one right now, I'm going to the next slide, is one of the all-time most clicked. And there's a lot of resources we have about it. But this to me is how you now take all the stuff we just talked about and actually put it into action. This, by the way, it's 5 layers. A company that is just starting off, like you do not need these 5 layers. You might have 2 or 3. This is for a company. This example comes from a company that's doing 150 million in ARR, Doug. Pretty big. 700 employees, global-ish. So they have a brand brief. Right. So the thing we're not going to talk too much about today, we do talk about it a little bit on the next slide, but for every campaign you create, you need a brief so that your RevOps team, your marketing stakeholders, your sales stakeholders get on the same page. Like you need a document that brings all of this stuff together. The who, the why, the what, the how, the where, the when. For a brand brief, this is more like the brand positioning framework. How does the brand sound? What is the brand archetype? Brand. What's the brand promise, story, all the stuff. Then, in this example, Doug, it's the segment. Which segment are we going after? And this could be very specific or very broad, like mid-market, right? This could be, all of mid-market. But in this case, we've narrowed it down with the third layer, vertical. And in that case, we've narrowed it down even more to the audience. And know what we did here? Take a look, everyone, on that fourth row, accounts. So this is a campaign for a specific set of accounts, for a specific vertical, in a specific segment that ladders and feeds and uses the brand story, the brand messaging framework, if you will, as a foundational component to it, right? Going back to the levels of altitude. And then what we did, it said, hey, wait a minute. This is not just something that marketing is going to do. The activities need to be outlined from a marketing and sales standpoint. So for each of these different audiences, based off the accounts, and this is a classic account model, not lead model. So some account-based marketing, Doug, I don't know, we'll call it whatever you want, just good go-to-market. You have things that marketing is doing on like creating offers, activating channels, et cetera, and then sales is doing outreach and follow-up. They're not going to just follow up with the leads. They're going to do some proactive things on the outreach side, right? And it's coordinated, it's orchestrated. I'll pause there because even the simple graphic, there's so much to unpack. And let me know if you have any questions about it, anyone. But this is the foundation to how you build a campaign. Anything you want to add, Doug?
Why don't you tell everyone, because I know some people will be asking, you have unaware and aware, you have pre-MI and MI. So MQ and SQL, I think, are more popular. Why don't you tell everyone what MI is?
Oh, yeah, I should have defined that. Marketing interested. So basically, they've given us a signal that they're interested in something that we think is relevant to saying, and I honestly think you could call this whatever, but are they showing some type of intent? Are they not showing some type of intent? What do you think? Because I know you have opinions on this.
Yeah, and well, I think it's really dependent upon your business. If you're selling a CRM, I think intent really matters because it's a very clear category. There's very clear defined existing demand. The attributes are there, et cetera. I do think that intent tends to be the tail that wags the dog.
Yep.
What I love about the model that you have here, and when you were at AirMeet, you and I talked about this a lot, is it's about engagement before anything else.
Yes.
And engagement comes before intent. I did a podcast on the RevOps show a couple of weeks ago. It's not out yet, but it was a rant on someone calling the death of MQL, and they're just calling it something else now. And going back to your marketing interested, you could call it whatever you want to call it. It's just good go to market, and you're defining those segments. I do think what you point out and what is missed too often. I remember when we started doing sales development, as part of our inbound strategy, we were offering that service. We actually called our outbound approach the inboundy outbound approach, which was the outbound was a very educational, very value creative approach. Because I think what people miss, there's a way that outbound can be can create value. And I think people miss, especially in larger sales or more complex sales, that content is super valuable. But content alone doesn't cause somebody to take action that wasn't already taking action, doesn't cause them to change course. And sometimes you need somebody to nudge, to add that piece of friction that creates an awareness that goes, oh, right. And if you've done those briefs and the things we've talked about, people are going to appreciate it, right? They might not be in the market for it.
Well, no, you're right. You're right. And actually, let's talk about how you create that kind of interest, that hook through some education. So on this next slide, pull it back up now, Doug, this is some of the most important components of a campaign brief. There's many other components of a campaign brief, depending again, how big and wide this campaign is. You need a theme, and that theme needs to have hooks in it, right? So why care, right? So you need a theme. One of the most important things people overlook when they design campaigns is this next one: trigger event. What's the thing necessitating the need for a campaign? I'll give you some examples. New competitor coming in. We got to do something against this new competitor. So we need to figure out how we can make sure this new competitor doesn't start eating our lunch. I remember this with Drift and Qualified. Hey, product launch, trigger event. Big event, inbound. The event's coming up. I hope to see many of you there. That might necessitate a need for a campaign, because why would you just do that event and then not continue the message, the excitement, the engagement? Like, that's kind of silly, right? So anyway, you need a trigger event. So and that trigger event's got to be pretty big. What's the objective of the campaign? And that should be measurable. Audience, super important. Like, who goes back to that other slide we just looked at, right? What's the segment? What's the accounts? Like, it could be literally, I've seen campaigns, Doug, you probably have as well, that are going after literally 50 accounts.
Yep.
And then I've seen campaigns that are going after basically the TAM, which I don't know. I mean, maybe it's good, maybe not good. I don't know. But like, very broad or very specific. The messaging of that campaign, the offers. So there's, again, in TAC Insider, there's a great set of briefs for different types of campaigns, brand campaigns, product campaigns, solution campaigns, event briefs to help you run your event. But if you don't put this on paper and get people aligned, we're going to talk about measurement next, which is one of the next pillars of creating integrated go-to-market. How is RevOps going to help you? How is sales going to know what's going on? How are you going to tell that to your executives? Like, here's why we're spending $150,000 on this campaign. And by the way, budget is one of those things in those briefs. What is the budget for all this? And how do you allocate budget? Like, I don't know. I mean, you're going to be in a tough situation when you justify what you did.
So what's a good example of a trigger event for, there is no specific event. So I'm a HR information system, and, we need to, we're looking to run a campaign. Like, we want to, we're supporting our go-to-market effort. There's not a new competitor. There's no specific event. There hasn't been a change in regulation. How would you go about that for just kind of your ongoing campaign? What would be a good example of a trigger event?
That's a great question. So 2 ways to think about that. One is you will create your own trigger events by setting goals. Like, oh, we have a pipeline goal of this much money. We need to build a campaign to go hit that pipeline goal. That is a trigger event. The other thing, so if it's not just like from a goal standpoint and like you're either behind or you just set a new goal, that can necessitate the need for something. It could be called an always on campaign. This campaign's always running because we want the market to know that we do this thing really, really well. It's highly differentiated. It's like 50% of the deals we win against this thing. Let's make sure people know about that. So it's always on. So that's why I would answer that.
So one of the things that I've advised, and I tend to do it more on the sales side of it, but where I've advised a lot of organizations that I think fits this.
Yep.
I refer to them as wedge offerings. So, a CRM assessment. You remember HubSpot used to do your inbound marketing assessment.
Yes.
Right. And that's kind of an always on, because what's always on for you is an event for the person once they hit that realization of, wait, we need to think about something.
I like that. I like that a lot. So we got like 10 minutes. Let's, I want to pull up a few more things, Doug, because this next one, and it's going to, the next stuff is going to be about like what we need to measure and like why you fail. So how do you deliver performance, measure what matters, avoid the pitfalls. So let's just quickly flash up, and you keep me on time here, this one, because I find when I talk to executives, specifically even CEOs, when I explain it in these terms, everything kind of just clicks and they're like, wait a minute, like, where can I see all this for my business? It's these 5 things. This is it.
Yep.
But it's like, oh, sure, it's easy. But like, when you think about this, like, imagine all the dashboards and places where all this data has to come from, or like it's almost mind bending, right? Even for our small businesses, but it's volume, conversion rates, velocity, value, cost. That's how you measure the efficacy of a campaign or really anything that you do. So for you, Doug, from a RevOps standpoint, like, where does RevOps start? Do you always start with volume, or is it dependent on some other factor when you think about campaign execution, campaign planning? Do you plan this as part of your campaigns? in terms, I mean, you're gonna set goals, but like, what do you measure all these things for everything? What do you think?
So, the funny thing is, the one that we measure probably the least here is volume.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is that, like, there's somebody who used to do, or who still does, outsource SDR work, very, very well known. I'm not going to name names here, but he has said multiple times that conversion rate's the most overrated metric because you're just solving for X. He's a very volume person. The challenge when you take that approach, and this is what scares me about, I don't mean to get on a tangent, but this is what scares me about the whole AI thing. By the way, the one issue is it's not really integrated. It's looking beyond what you're doing, beyond your game. But you're in this solve for X. And so I might drive a short-term number, but I'm burning, the term became you're burning your TAM. The two things that we focus on the most are conversion rates and velocity.
I'm going to skip to this, which is kind of related to this slide then, with this visual.
Correct.
This one
right.
here.
And by the way, what we look at too is early conversion rates, because when you look at, like, our goal with sales and marketing, it's an influence game, right? The place where someone is open to influence is before they've decided on what they need to do. So how can I generate, if you think about what conversion tells you, it tells you what the volume is. How can I maximize my throughput, right? How can I get, the most juice for the squeeze? So if I can generate engagement, right? I don't need you to want to buy something. I can't control if you have the problem or if the problem ranks high enough for you to do something about it right now. Like, this was some of the challenge that you had at Airme, right? Yeah. People had the problem, but it wasn't a high priority problem. It was a new thing that they thought about. And so when the measurement was all about revenue, like, okay, well, wait a second, we're discounting that early part to really manage that, and we were stuck between those two games, which then connects to velocity, right? So Mark, this, we changed the name of the company from Imagine to Lift. The reason we changed the name to Lift is because I was talking, and I talk regularly about the principle of lift, right? How planes fly.
Yep.
Right. Velocity above the wing. The wind above the wing is greater than below the wing. It creates a vacuum and it pulls the plane up. That's that's velocity, right? That enables you to go farther, faster.
And your logo, Mark, shows that. I think we have
Correct.
two our brands actually speak to what we do, which is, by the way, part of this whole thing when it comes to integrated approach to your go-to-market.
Correct.
So anyway,
so how can we, what are the things? My favorite thing to do was a what causes sales analysis, right? That's what I want to focus on. And if I can influence what causes sales, then again, the result takes care of itself.
So you've two slides here that we want to get through. Hopefully we'll see why RevOps initiatives fail, the cost and impact of the failure to integrate. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's do why they fail. And because the second one I can do really quickly.
Okay. Why they fail. This is really important because the point we're trying to make too during this whole conversation, folks, is you can't run integrated campaigns without RevOps. If you haven't picked up on that, I just said it. It's extremely hard to do all this stuff, right? You could have the best messaging and best offers, best everything, but if you don't have the backstage, the back office, and the support systems, like, stuff is gonna get really weird really fast.
Yep. And so we talked about the first one already. It's a holistic experience. You've got to manage for the whole.
Okay.
Right? The second reason, in today's game, you're not implementing integrated go-to-market strategies without technology. And once you bring technology to play, your data structure and architecture is the game. So if you have not paid attention to the data structure and architecture, you're going to be in quicksand. And by the way, I see people get lost on the idea of clean data. And I'm not saying that clean data isn't helpful, right? But what I'm saying is the idea of clean data, dirty data, that's a symptom. What's really happening is the data architecture isn't clear, or it's too inflexible, right? You've built it for, I've analyzed hundreds of playbooks. And the fundamental problem I've seen in most playbooks is they only have one play. They take the sale from the beginning to the end.
No.
and even Bill Walsh realized you have to adjust the plays that you're calling. You've got to account for the user. Mark, how many campaigns have you seen that's like, well, have you thought about who's using it? Have you thought about what's happening? Or have you thought about how many other emails you're sending or whatever else is going on?
Start with the who.
Right. And the last thing, and this applies to everything. I'm going to go way back to when Colin Powell was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was testifying before Congress, and he said, indecision has cost American businesses and governments billions of dollars more than poor decision has. The thing about strategy, and when you talk about what is strategy is choice. And I'll tell you, it's scary to make a choice. Did you know that the word decide and the word homicide both have the same suffix? They both mean the same thing. Side both means to kill. When you decide, you're killing your options, right? And so what happens is, and you've seen it, right? I'm not going to name companies, but we've shared the experience with some of them. They put one foot into the initiative because it makes all the sense in the world and they're excited, but they never take the other foot out of the other thing. And now all of a sudden they're playing middle of the road and they're not in either place. And then suddenly that story disappears, and et cetera. So you've got to make the choices.
It goes back to focus. We said that, right? Like, make a choice to focus. Make it like.
And by the way, don't tell me what your choice is. I'll see what your choice is. The actions that people are taking, that's the choice that you've made.
So this is perfect tee up for this last visual, the cost of failure. So hold on, wait. So let me ask you this though: 19% drag on growth rate and profit margins when you fail to integrate. So what does that mean? Like, you put more color to that stat. That's I mean, that could be at scale. Going back to the volume, if you're talking about $100 million business.
Well, if you're talking about $100 million business, shit, what if you're talking about $1 billion business? But Mark, even if you're talking about $1 million to $5 million business,
doesn't matter,
because
right?
that 19% drag compounds.
So it's even worse. Yeah.
Right. So this is research from Serious Decisions of looking at, the distinction between organizations that have a demonstrated holistic, strong RevOps function, are delivering aligned communications and so forth versus those that are close. And by the way, this is a comparison to the middle group, not comparing the top 20% to the bottom 20%. It's comparing the top 30% to the middle 50%. So it's not a huge issue, but those drags, and by the way, the place where it hits, tech benefits from the fact of very, very high gross margins. We work with a lot of traditional industries that are in that, in that 35 to 60% gross margin.
Yep.
A 5% impact on gross margin. If you're at 50%, that's like a 10% hit on revenue.
That's a huge number,
right? It's
a huge number.
So yeah, it's huge. I think your favorite, I thought of you as I was putting the first one down. The difficulty if you don't integrate is you're competing with Ant.
Yeah. I mean,
so what do you do? Well, we do this and we do this and we do this and we do this and we do this, right? The biggest issue I've seen with people in their go-to-market, especially their message, is they compete with their own message. It's not 100%. Their competitors that the problem is. It's that they're not delivering a single message.
We're kind of guilty of this with our even small business, right? Like, I think we finally distilled it down, but like, we also had two brands at one point, like Club PF and TAC, and like, what the fuck? What are we doing here? Like, what are we doing?
We're going through the same thing. I'm looking at it going, wait a second. I think maybe we're doing things. We're offering to do a broader set of things than companies that are 10 times our size do. So maybe we need to focus on it. And it's tough. Yeah.
Well, let's end it with this, and then we'll look at one more thing before this. But like this is like, you can't solve upstream problems downstream. So unpack this a little bit for everyone.
Yeah. So, the tendency that we all want to do is we want to jump in and we want to start doing things. And especially in the beginning, how hard can this be? How complicated can this be? Again, sometimes it's not complicated, but it's always complex. And so I call it the inverse friction principle. If we don't account for it up front, why do you need to do the brief? Because if you don't think about why you're doing what you're doing before you do it, you can't learn. And all you've done is transferred all the friction and disruption to the point of execution. And then you throw your hands up and you say, why can't I get anything done?
Yep.
Right. And so what's happening is we're solving the problems that we should be solving upstream. We're waiting for kids to fall into the river, and we're figuring out how do we save them from drowning, rather than someone saying, well, what if we put a barrier between this and this that would prevent the kid from, by the way, that's a true solve upstream problem.
No, yeah. Well, it's also play the game before you play the game.
Yep.
I'll leave it with that. And then I'll congratulate you again on this book. I have the book. It's awesome. I mean, I can't believe it's 200 pages. It is packed with information. So you're going to give this away to someone, it looks like?
Yeah, we're going to give it away to 10% of the people that enter. So the more people that enter, the more that we're going to give away. How about that?
I like that. I like that. We'll fuse it as part of the follow-up email. If you already have the book, let Doug know what you think about it. Doug, it's not easy to write a book, so congratulations. This is awesome.
It's funny though, Mark. I've had some people who know me. He said that they were surprised that I wrote a book and it was only 241 pages.
You have a good editor. You have a good editor. Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any follow-ups, let us know. You can find us on LinkedIn. We had a lot of fun with this. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. We tried to make this very interactive, engaging, and not boring. So appreciate that. Again, thanks everyone. If there's anything that you want to get off your chest really quick, let us know in the chat. We can hang out for a few minutes. Yes, Ruben, we will share the giveaway link, TAC Insider, everything in the follow-up email. It will come out. But we can also drop it. If you have the link right now, Doug, you can put it in the chat. If you have the link, maybe I can find it really quick. Hold on. I can probably get it. I got it too. I'm a fast.
You got it?
Yep. There you go. You'll also get in the follow-up email though. Any final word that you want to leave the audience with, Doug?
The thing that I've learned that is the precursor to your growth rate is what's your learning rate.
Yes.
Brief, act, adjust, brief, act, adjust. You do that, you repeat it, you look back and you go, how did we get here so fast?
Love it. The game is won before it's fought. That famous proverb. I think it's a proverb.
It's a proverb now.
Yes. All right, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. See you, Doug.
See you.